This is part 5 of the series of videos on the racial origins of Indians. It explains the racial origins of various peoples in the Indian subcontinent. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. In the earlier videos, I provided the history of the origins of various races before Noah's flood. That was in part 1. In part 2, I provided the history of the racial origins of various nations after the flood. In part 3, I provided the history of how various people, how Noah's true religion was perverted. In part 4, I provided history of how various peoples were forced to spread out from Babylon. In part 5 now, I will focus on the racial identity of various peoples in the Indian subcontinent. Now, when the flood waters subsided, the ark landed in the mountains of Ararat in what we know today as eastern Turkey. About 75 years after the flood, God gave Noah a plan to colonize different areas of the earth by different branches of his descendants along racial lines. However, a slight majority of mankind rebelled against God's plan and went to the land of Shinar to set up their own civilization. The original people who migrated to India were among the rebels in the land of Shinar. When Semiramis was propagating her Babylonian mystery religion from Babylon and committing literal fornication with the kings of the earth as a temple prostitute, the kings, actually patriarchs at that time of the tribes that eventually settled in India, were among them. They propagated Semiramis's religion among their descendants. The multitude of gods of the Indian pantheon, similar to the gods of the Egyptian, Greek, and Roman pantheons, are proof of that. The remnants of the temple prostitute system of Semiramis are found in South India in the Devdasi system. In the Babylonian mystery religion, Nimrod was worshipped as a bull. Since Semiramis was his mother, she would be worshipped as a cow. Indians are the only ones who worship the cow. This shows how strong Semiramis's influence was on the kings of the Indian when they still lived near Babylon and their population was still quite small. She was, after all, their ancestor, Cush's illegal wife. Now, major settlers in India are the descendants of Cush. There are many proofs of that. Their warriors were known as Kassites in history, which is simply a variation of the name Kushites spelled with a C or Kushites spelled with a K. They derived their name from their ancestor Kush. The name Kshatriya, warrior, is also derived from the name Kassite or Kushite. Only two people have maintained a caste system, Indians and to some extent the Egyptians. Indians credit the creation of their caste system to Manu. Manu is thought to have survived the flood and is believed to be Noah. But Noah, being a servant of God, could not have created an evil system such as the caste system in India. There is no evidence from history anywhere of Noah having imposed such a system on his descendants. In addition, the ancestors of Indians had rebelled against Noah and separated from him to go to the land of Shinar. Cush, or Ethiopia, which means black, the ancestor of many Indians, is listed as the first ruler in Egypt's first dynasty under the name of Meni, that is Meni, or Mena, or Mena, or Menes, or Menes in Greek. The name means the establisher. He is the real Manu of the Indian tradition, the establisher of man's civilization in Shinar, credited with creating the caste system. He was the overall leader of the rebels. In order to manage various building projects, agricultural production, and govern the people in an orderly manner, he assigned duties to various peoples and required them to strictly stay within the bounds of their duties. His own descendants were the most dutiful in this regard. Requiring people to strictly stay within the bounds of the assigned duties calcified into India's rigid caste system. A form of the caste system also exists in Egypt, where he initially led a branch of his descendants with curly hair like his own. He eventually settled in Ethiopia, a country named after him. India's caste system is proof that a second branch of Kush's descendants finally settled in India. This branch was dark in color with straight hair. Because Kush's father Ham was white, Kush's descendants could range in color from completely black to dark brown and shades in between. While Kush took a branch of his descendants west to Egypt and Ethiopia, the other branch migrated east to India. The reason they separated is that they received different languages at Babel in the confusion of language of mankind. While migrating east, they gave their name to the Hindu Kush mountains. A few, according to Craig White, In Search of the Origin of Nations, 2003 publication, pages 189 to 190, quoted in United Church of God Bible commentary. It states, a few other telltale signs of the movement to eastwards of the sons of Kush include a land called Kushian in modern Pakistan. Just to the north of India also lay the land Kashgana, and in the south of India lay a river called Krishna. All of these names are variously derivatives of Kush. Now, 19th century author George Faber also wrote about the identity of the people of India. Their military nobility is acknowledged to be the same family as the Sakas or Chasas, who maintain that their great common ancestor was Kusha or Kush. But we read in a special manner of two lands of Kush, the Asiatic and the African. These were by the Greeks called the two Ethiopias, but by the Hindus, as by the sacred writers, they are denominated the land of Kush within and the land of Kush without. This is from The Origin of Pagan Idolatry, 1816, as quoted by Craig White on page 99. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote, the Ethiopians from the sunrise were marshaled with the Indians and did not at all differ from them in appearance, but only in their language and their hair. For the eastern Ethiopians are straight haired, but those of Africa have hair more curly than that of any other people. These Ethiopians from Asia were accounted almost the same as the Indians of India. This is from Polymnia, section 20 of Herodotus. But in Black Athena, the Afro-Asiatic roots of classical civilization, in that book, author Martin Burnell wrote, the tradition of two Ethiopias is much older than the 5th century BC Greek historian Herodotus. In the Odyssey of the Greek writer Homer, the Ethiopians are described as dwelling sundered in twain, means divided in two. The fathermost of men, somewhere Hyperion, that is, the sun sets, and some where it rises. Thus, there were black men, Ethiopians, from western Libya in Africa and eastern Mesopotamia, again quoted by Craig White in pages 100 to 101. Thus, ancient historians note that there are two branches of the Kushites, the western branch in Ethiopia with curly hair, and the eastern branch in India with straight or wavy hair. Next, consider various Indian gods or avatars, meaning reincarnation of previous gods. That's what the word avatars means. The warrior Kali Ma or Durga is none other than Nyama. She is the mother of all black people. Before the flood, she fought in battles with her family and is credited with having slain giants, the Nephilim of the Bible, and the Neanderthals of archaeology, who did not survive the flood because they all perished in it. So, this is Nyama fought with spears and javelin in a war with the giants. She was a black Negro woman. Kush was her firstborn son. So that is what Durga is, Kali Ma is. She is a warrior, and that is exactly what Nyama was. The Bible lists the sons of Cush in Genesis 10 verses 7 to 8. And the sons of Cush, Seba and Havilah, and Sabta and Rama and Sabtika. And the sons of Rama, Sheba and Dedan. And Cush begat Nimrod. Did you notice that one of the sons of Cush is named Rama? In all likelihood, this very Rama was the one with the straight hair who migrated to India. He was an older half brother of Nimrod. The age difference between them was about 20 to 25 years. The Rama of Genesis 10 verse 7 is most likely the Rama of Indian tradition. The Indian Rama could not have existed before the flood. If he had, he would have been deified as a god with the other gods. Instead, he is considered an avatar or reincarnation of Vishnu. This means that according to biblical history and the history of myths, he existed after the flood and in very early post flood history. Thus, Rama of Indian tradition did not exist millions of years ago, but walked the earth about 3,850 to 4,275 years ago. He lived a total of about 425 years. The Rama tradition in India thus is further proof that most Indians are descendants of Kush. Now let us identify who Krishna was. Krishna was dark in color. So was Rama for that matter, being the son of Kush. Krishna is associated with cow and calf worship. Consider how Nimrod was worshipped in the Babylonian mystery religion of his mother Semiramis. One of the symbols for worship of Nimrod was the calf. A pair of bulls was also a symbol of worship for Nimrod in Egypt. His Egyptian name was Osiris, while Semiramis was known as Isis, as quoted in Part 3, Diodorus of Sicily in his historical library, Book 1, Chapter 2, pages 27 to 29. So, what would be the symbol for the worship of Nimrod's mother then? The cow, of course. So, cow and calf worship of India is nothing else but the worship of Nimrod and his mother Semiramis, which is also the origin of mother and child worship of the Babylonian mysteries religion. Thus, Krishna of Indian tradition is none other than Nimrod. Krishna is also described as a seducer of girls or a womanizer. That too describes the activities of Nimrod immediately after the flood. He was merely imitating the acts of his ancestors Lamech and Tubal-Cain before the flood, who married many women. He had assumed Tubal-Cain's other name Dionysius after the flood. Thus, Krishna again stands identified as Nimrod. He walked the earth between 4,130 to 4,250 years ago. He was slain prematurely at about 120 years of age. Though Nimrod did not migrate to India but to Egypt, the Krishna tradition in India indicates that he had a strong influence over the descendants of his half brother Rama. I will explain how Krishna came to be associated with Hindu scriptures when I discuss the Brahmins in part 6. In real life, Krishna and Rama were half brothers, being the sons of Kush and grandsons of Niyama. Initially, both were active among the rebels at Babel. Krishna or Nimrod was, of course, one of the chief leaders. Then, because of receiving separate languages, they had to part. All the stories written about them and their words and deeds by Vyasa, in the case of Krishna in the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, and Valmiki in the case of Rama and the Ramayana, are encrusted with myths removed from the actual time period and place, designed to teach lessons and values. It is not real history of Krishna. He came to be associated with Indian history because he interacted with Rama and few of his children, and because he was worshipped as a god by them, before Rama was deified himself by his descendants. But they can be identified in real history, which I will cover in part 5. The Bible does not record any descendants of Nimrod or Krishna. It is also likely that another son of Cush, Seba, stated in Genesis 10 verse 7, with straight hair migrated to India and Sri Lanka. His descendants in South India are known as Dravidians. Ancient historians call them Sebe from Smith's Classical Dictionary. Next, let's look at the racial origins of Rajputs. Just as Cush, the black son of Ham, and Niyama had two branches of his descendants, the western one had curly hair and the eastern one with straight hair. Historians believe that Phut or Put, another son of Ham and Niyama, had two branches of descendants, one with slightly curly hair and the other with straight hair. The one with curly hair are well known to have settled in Libya. Lesser known is that the eastern branch with straight hair settled in India. Regarding the people of Foot, historian George Rawlinson wrote, "This term is obscure. In most scriptures, Foot is joined with tribes which are distinctly African, but in two of them, in Ezekiel 10 and Ezekiel 27:10 and 38:5. The accompanying nations seem to be Asiatic. The explanation of this may possibly be that as there are two Kushes, so there are two Foots, one Asiatic and other African. This is from quoted in the United Church of God Bible Commentary, as quoted from Craig White on page 97. Large western parts of India are known as Rajputana or modern Rajasthan state. Rajputana was a group of princely states ruled over by a warrior group of people known as the Rajputs, which means chief of Put or chief rulers or Rajas over Put, from Encyclopedia Britannica 11th edition. Foot or Put means a warrior in Hebrew. The Futites over millennia would certainly have mixed with the Kushites. In northern India near Bhutan, we find the town called Panta, near later Patliputra, the capital city of Magda state. The Rajputs and others drove the Dravidian Kushites into central and southern India. Those Futites which settled in central India mixed with the Dravidians. In the east, some mixed with the Mongoloids. This is again from Craig White, pages 97 to 98. Another characteristics of the Futites is that they have done very poorly in agricultural pursuits. In most places, they have let their previously fertile lands turn into deserts. It is true of the western Futite branch in Libya as well as the eastern Futite branch in Rajasthan. When we identify the Kushites in India, we are referring to his sons Rama and Siba, father of the Dravidians. The descendants of Siba, the son of Kush in India, would be settled mainly in the Indian states of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana. They would be mixed with the Futites in Madhya Pradesh, parts of Maharashtra state. Sri Lankans are also descendants of Siba. The descendants of Rama would be settled in North and East India and mixed with the Futites in eastern Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Bengal, including Bangladesh and Assam. The Futites live mainly in Rajasthan, Gujarat, northwestern parts of Madhya Pradesh and northern Maharashtra, and mix with the descendants of Rama and Siba in states already described, which are Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. Being of Indian origin, I have traveled extensively in India by train. One can notice that people in rural areas in certain states are darker than people in urban areas. The likely reason is that in urban areas, people have racially mixed with those of lighter skin, such as some of the Futites and then Brahmins and others, whereas those in rural areas have not mixed so heavily. Now, according to the Babylonian historian Brassus, Ham, the father of Cush and Phut, spent his last decades ruling in Bactria, located in present-day Turkmenistan, North Afghanistan, southern Uzbekistan, and western Tajikistan, and among the Persians. The Kushites lived in that area. They later migrated to India. So Cush was thus ruling over the eastern branch of his sons Cush and Phut. Since he was allowed to rule over them also means that most likely Elam, the white son of Shem, the ancestor of the Persians, had married one of Ham's daughters. This is also evidence that most of the Indians are descendants of Ham. It seems Phut, the son of Ham, also spent some time in the same area. The likely explanation is that the eastern branch of his descendants still lived there, who then later migrated to India. Now, the racial origins of the Brahmins, the highest caste, who are also priests, have already been identified. They are descendants of Arphaxad, the white son of Shem. They were lured by those who rebelled against Noah to join them with great financial incentives in the form of lands, freedom from tribute and taxes, and receiving the generous offerings of the people for their priestly duties. but they were forced to mix with the dark descendants of Cush and Phut, as one of the goals Cush, Nimrod, and Semiramis had was to mix the races when all lived in the land of Shinar in and around Babylon. This racial mixing would have continued for over the past 4,000 years. So the Brahmins live in every state in India because they were priests to all the people in India. Their activities and falsehoods and the religion they propagated would be discussed in detail in part 6 of the videos. The eastern branches, now let's look at the racial origins of Punjabis. The eastern branches of Rama and Siba, the sons of Kush and Phut, are not the only races living in India. Besides the Brahmins, other white people are settled in North India, mixed with the descendants of Rama and the Brahmins. This is how this came about. White people of America, British Commonwealth nations, Jews in Israel and worldwide, France, Switzerland, Ireland, Scandinavian and Benelux countries, are descended from the 12 tribes of the biblical patriarch Israel, whose other name was Jacob, who was the grandson of Abraham. After ancient Israel's exodus from Egypt, they settled in the land of the Canaanites called Palestine by the Romans, which is the land of Israel today. After the death of King Solomon, the nation split into two kingdoms, with the southern kingdom called the House of Judah or Jews, consisting of the two tribes of Judah and Benjamin, with some from the tribe of Levi mixed in, and the northern kingdom called the House of Israel, consisting of the other 10 tribes. Because of their sins, God allowed the northern house of Israel to be defeated by the Assyrians, as ancestors of the modern Germans, who enslaved and removed them from their lands completely by 722 BCE and resettled them in their own southern and eastern provinces around the Caspian and Black Seas. Within 10 years after the fall of the house of Israel, the Assyrian king returned and captured all the fortified cities of the southern kingdom, the house of Judah, but he was unable to take the capital Jerusalem. He placed the Jews taken captive in this campaign with the captives of the house of Israel in various provinces of his empire. Even before the Assyrian empire was destroyed in 612 BCE, many of the Israelites and the Jews had escaped captivity under the Assyrians. After the destruction of the Assyrian Empire, most of them obtained their freedom, though some followed the Assyrians out of the land of Assyria into Germany. These free white Israelites roamed the Eurasian steppes from 700 BCE to 200 BCE. Some of them intermarried with the local peoples among whom they roamed and settled down. They also roamed in northwestern India. Some of them intermarried among Indians in Punjab, most definitely among the royalty, that is the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins. Brahmins have always angled to marry the most beautiful women they can find. They certainly must have done everything possible to seek out and marry European white daughters of the Israelites roaming among them. And the Israelite men would also have married into the highest castes. Most of the people living in what I call Greater Punjab, consisting of the whole of Pakistan, including all the Sindhis there, and the Indian states of Punjab, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, Delhi, Uttarakhand, and Uttar Pradesh, they are all descendants of these Israelites who had intermarried with Indians, particularly the Brahmins and Kshatriyas. The Jews among these Indians are known today as Jats, which is derived from the word Jude, a short form of the word Judah. The fact that the Jats live in Greater Punjab is also proof that other Punjabis, particularly Kshatriyas and Brahmins, are one and the same people, meaning from intermarriages with the other tribes of Israel. Here is a quote concerning the origins of Jats from Appendix 13 in the United Church of God e-booklet titled The Throne of Britain, Its Biblical Origins and Future. It states, Judah was a nation of Judahites or Jews, Benjamites and Levites. Thus it appears that a large number of these tribal groups were added to the captivity of the northern Israelites, who were at that time located in Assyria and Armenia in the west and Media and Persia in the east. It seems likely that the Jewish captives were taken to these same areas. Author Stephen Collins notes, when describing the Scythian tribes who migrated out of Asia in the 2nd century BC, these were previously captive Israelites, descendants of Isaac. George Rawlinson notes that the greatest tribe, the Massagetae, who was also named the Great Jits or Jats. This is from Jats, the Sixth Oriental Monarchy, 1872, volume 11 page 357. The term Jat has survived as a caste name in northwest India, which bordered Persia and Parthia into modern times, attesting to the ancient dominance of the Jats in that region. This name could conceivably be a contraction of Judite, Hebrew Yehudi, which uh, perhaps became Jehuti. We'll call, yeah, okay. It is possible that these people were related to a group known as the Yushi, says the Encyclopedia Britannica. Yushi, also called Indo-Scythes, ancient people who ruled in Bactria, now Afghanistan and India, from 128 BC to AD 450. The Yushi are first mentioned in Chinese sources at the beginning of the 2nd century BC as nomads living in northwest China. They and related tribes are the Asi or Asiani and Tokarians or Tokari of Western sources. And the Asi may well be the Asher of the North sagas. Asher is also a tribe of Israelites. In the same article, the Britannica says the Hephthalites were originally a Yushi tribe. They were also known as the White Huns, and their names are sometimes given as Nephthalites. So compare Hephthalites or White Huns from Encyclopedia Britannica 11th edition online at 89. Likely, as Collins points out, it's a derivation of the ancient tribe of Naphtali. If the name Yushi perhaps derives from Judah or Yehuda, then the description of Naphtali as a Yushi tribe could possibly indicate that the Jews were dispersed throughout the other tribes as leaders in their migrations. About 135 years after the Assyrian captivity of the house of Israel, and a portion of the house of Judah 10 years later, in 587 BCE, the southern kingdom, the house of Judah, was defeated by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar and removed from their land and settled in the provinces of Babylon. Later, the Persian Medes defeated the Babylonians and absorbed the entire Babylonian Empire into the Persian Empire. Cyrus the Great of Persia made a decree to allow the Jews in his kingdom to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple and restore the Jewish worship system. But only a tiny few of the Jews went back. The descendants of these Jews are known today as Jews around the world because they have maintained their identity. The vast majority of the remaining Jews did not return to Jerusalem. Many of their descendants can be found in Iran. In Greater Punjab today, they are known as Saini, Sani, Soni, and Soni, Saini being the generic name, though many now use their different gotras, names such as Khosla, Banga, Chandok, Banwayat, Badwal, Chaudhry, etc. as their last names. Here is another tidbit of information. About 60% of Jats live in Pakistan and are Muslims. About 30% are Sikhs and about 10% are Hindus. I don't know what percentage of Sainis converted to Islam and live in Pakistan, but about half of those in India are Sikhs and the other half are Hindus. Kshatriyas were originally black with straight hair as contrasted with curly hair of black Negroes. Brahmins, on the other hand, were racially white, but they had been lured with massive financial incentives to become priests and preach the religion of the ancestor of the Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras, the black man Kush. Initially, they were forced to mix racially. That's why the Brahmins are no longer European white. They have been mixing with blacks for more than 4,000 years. After the original powerful Kshatriya rulers passed away, the Brahmins asserted themselves and changed the rules for marriages to suit themselves. Then the European white Israelites came into Punjab, and they have been mixing with the already mixed Brahmins and Kshatriyas for about 2500 years. Then the Mughals or Muslims conquered India. Their descendants live in North India and Pakistan. They too are descendants of Israelite tribes after they mixed with the local peoples. Those that mixed with the local people stayed in the lands where they married, whereas other Israelites who remained racially unmixed migrated to the British Isles and northwestern Europe. Just as other Israelites forgot their religion and became Hindus and Sikhs, those who were overcome by Islam became Muslims and later invaded India. Besides these large migrations into India, there have been smaller migrations later. The Parsis of Mumbai in India and Sindh state of Pakistan are Persians who have settled in India. The Persians are the descendants of Elam, the white son of Shem. However, in invasions and interactions of the Persians with the Kassites of India, some Elamites are slightly darker in color because they are racially mixed. There has also been an ancient colony of Jews settled in what is today Kerala state in South India. In part 6, I will discuss in detail how the Brahmins of India became part of the corrupt religion, propagated it for their own financial benefits, and how they have always made up their own rules and changed them to benefit themselves, and have worked ruthlessly to destroy all religious competition or, uh, or to their position in society. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos and read my articles on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube channel Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini to watch and get information on the latest videos.